This is This is Aus einem April, which means out of April in English. This is a poem by Frank O'Hara. We dust the walls, and of course we are weeping larks, falling all over the heavens with our shoulders clasped in someone's armpits so tightly, and our throats are full. Haven't you ever fallen down at Christmas and didn't it move everyone who saw you? Isn't that what the tree means? The pure pleasure of making weep those whom you cannot move by your flights. It's enough to drive one to suicide, and the rooftops are falling apart like the applause of rough, long-nailed, intimate, roughened by kisses, hands. Fingers more breathless than a tongue laid upon the lips in the hour of sunlight. Early morning, before the mist rolls in from the sea, and out there, everything is turbulent and green.
Thanks for coming to this Out at the Library event. If you hadn't had a chance to look at the display, please do. This display and Out at the Library comes from the San Francisco Public Library and from a display that they made. It's called Out at the Library, Celebrating the James C. Hormel Gay and Lesbian Center, and it was made to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the development of that center in 2005. And please do also note that our banner out there. There have been many wonderful sponsors that have helped make Out at the Library happen in Missoula, so please do note them and thank them where you do see them. Casey Charles is professor and chair of the English department at the University of Montana, specializing in queer studies and law and literature. Adrian Rich and Carolyn Forshee have chosen his poems as contest winners, and his chapbook, Controlled Burn, was named by the Missoula Independent as one of the 10 best local publications of 2007. Melissa Kwasny is the author of 3 books of poems and 2 novels. In 2004, while visiting writer at the University of Wyoming, she designed and co-taught Laramie's first ever international lesbian and gay literature course. We are very lucky to have these 2 wonderful Montana poets with us here this evening, so I think you have a great reading ahead of you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm going to. This is it's kind of hard to spread out up here because it's not very big, but I'm going to read some gay poems and some Montana poems. Usually they come together for me for some reason. I'm not quite sure why, but anyway, the first poem I'm going to read is called Stonewall, and the character in it is Russell, but it's not the Russell that you might know, some of you. But anyway, it's called Stonewall. Russell builds a stone wall in his backyard, the rocks from slides south of Perma, flat and bronze. He lifts them into his pickup, culled from loose scree near Paradise. In his mind, a flagstone path, Irish moss and woolly thyme spilling over blue steps. He looks out for others hunting shale, jealous of his find, studies the dusk as he loads up, goads himself to talk to a mason in town, hoping to learn from someone who loves slate, blue-brown archaeologies, the fit of rectangles along a 2-foot base, constructing borders, walling in. Russ wants to take a friend with him on his trips up Lone Mountain past the gorge, someone with calluses who can smell trout in backwater, jump in when it gets too hot, somebody who licks salt from the inside of pistachio nuts, or shells, pricks up an ear when an osprey squeals, dipping down to snag a cutthroat, somebody who can see Russ as he is, a man who likes to solve puzzles rocks make, likes to see them fit together, wants to help heave slabs into the truck bed, straddle the sanded plot, smooth and ready. I wanted to read some short poems first. That was one of them. And the other one, this one is called Out in Idaho. And it's about someone who's dead now. The stroke blew his cover. He landed in St. Paul's for a week, and his family found out. He had to learn to walk again, metal crutches looped through his arms. His mom drove down from Sandpoint for a day, but his brothers stayed put, the ones laid off by Boise Cascade. After he got out, he heard nothing from home and decided to go off the meds. The doctors gave him 2 months. His hate of them spoke low and halting. A metal loop pierced the lower lip, shaking when he mentioned Sarah, the social worker he depended on, until she quit her job. He had 2 dogs, one a puppy injured while playing with the other. Who would take them? Staring at the carpet, he talked about his supply of painkillers, about the closets he lived in, the Milltown he'd left at 16, banged into lockers at Colburn High, told to go to hell at church. He fled to hide in our college town. We knew his face from the bar in the basement where the county kept its homos, drunk and dark, until they came out in time to get beat up by gangs of Greeks emerging from the logjam. What we felt near him was fear, for ourselves more than for him. We didn't want to watch him die either, but were stuck for 2 hours in that green room, sitting in a circle. We listened, gave him cookies and herbal tea. That's the only AIDS poem I'm going to read today. And since I'm reading with Melissa and Briar, both of whom are they're from around Basin, and I went out to Basin to the Montana Artist Refuge last summer and had a great time, and I wrote this poem, and they didn't want to put this poem into their newsletter, but I was able. This is after Richard Hugo, but of course everything is, I guess, in Montana. But anyway, that's what it says at the top of it. So I'm trying to catch his kind of voice. Everybody tries to. It's called Deeper into Basin. You wonder why this town's still on the map. The gold's gone, abandoned shafts boarded up, smelted or sent to Wales. Quartz veins remain, poor man's El Dorado. For most motorhomes, the Merry Widow health mine has hookups. 5 days of radon could cure what ails you. Signs spanning the gulch like a surprise party, slung across pines, welcoming arthritis. Why buy a double wide in this depression? On the highway from Butte to Helena, 4 lanes of blacktop levied and cycloned, skewering the river, what's left of it. Semis doing 80 a stone's throw away. Like living on a runway, in a barrel, your ears filled with friction. The nearest gas, 10 miles north, a truck stop stocked with corn nuts. There's nowhere else to go, not much left here. The Silver Saddle serves drinks to bikers, hirsute and fat. Pizza place has gone downhill. New owner, stars and stripes in the window, pickups parked outside, ranch dressing on iceberg wedges. They're just passing through, on their way to float or fish, build a trophy home near Bozeman, reclaim a mine with peat moss, some just lost. Locals hang at the high note beside an old stone home, eat scones and quiche with the girls. Handsome dykes, Briar and Nan and MJ, carved out their tract 10 years back, started the Artist's Refuge in the Masonic Temple. Now turpentine and tortured brushes fill the space. New Yorkers. The girls serve scrambled eggs and talk, about fires mostly, up Jack Creek, 10% contained. Parched lodgepoles, bark infested with beetles, forest thick as a full pegboard, a truck of illegals headed east to pick beets. Smoke opaques the slopes of the bowl, stings ducks, erases contours. A stage 2 alert in Deer Lodge, ready to ignite August. A state on fire, dry lightning, drunk campers, an arson out to see his name in print. And dogs. Down Main Street, St. Bernard's lumber like they own the place. Poodle named Jerry flits around like a gay waiter. Could use one out here where men curl bills and drive three-wheelers. Sex looks best with a mirror. Teens ride around two to a bike in tank tops, gap-toothed, through alleys full of dusty Rottweilers, beer cans. You stay inside, read Rust, Rex flower faded on brick. You're a refugee, a grasshopper eating mullein, yellow as you lurch, a wooden bird amid the marigolds. You don't belong, the lark who banged the pane, too stunned to eat white bread. Your only friend, a hummingbird who left when the sweet water dried up. On the fence, a sign says art show in front of garbage. Beyond, burnt siding, a red roof, aspens shimmer through the indefensible space. Winds shift the heart-shaped leaves, yours beating fast before the plain man, thin and suspendered, sleeves rolled, on the road with his broad-rimmed brood. You wonder what he thinks of your pumped calves, your lifted wrist and smile. Would he shun you? Could you take him down to Boulder River, across a white quartz field to the deep pool where you cast your line and feel trout pull? If you asked, would he hike with you? Hop stones, smooth, warm, anchored in rapids where fish hide, wily and stressed? Join you on the granite where you lie naked? Would he swim with you in the churn, stick his head under the falls, spread his arms long and white against the current? That was last summer when it was burning up, as you guys all recall, I'm sure, those of you that were here. And a lot of Hutterites and others come to the health mines sometimes. I should have explained that before reading the end of the poem, but they come to get cured in the health mines as well. So I need, and then also I have a pony poem. Though pony is actually a lot better place than I thought it was when I was there. I found out since there's some guys on gay.com that are from Pony. So I don't want to cast too many aspersions on Pony or on Basin, because I really love Basin. And I actually liked Pony. I went to Pony well, you'll find out what I was doing, but anyway, 1.5 hours up, you need to tell me, because I don't really have a clock here. Anyway, so this is called Pony, Montana. How many of you ever been to Pony? Yeah, see, okay, so it's kind of a neat place. I came here to get away, finish the book, holed up in the ramshackle, rented sight unseen, plastic flowers and saggy bed. Hard living killed the owner last year, his pipe on a shelf. East of Butte, you get off at Cardwell, head south. I backed in so they wouldn't see my rainbow. A short guy named Tecumseh called it Pony. He came for gold. Morris State Bank still stands before Hollowtop. Bricks and plywood windows, alone against the white mountain in June, empty of the assay. The tobacco roots run west of town, now in its third boom. At the park where my phone came into range, I barely noticed the kid near the fire pit. Analog roaming and voices and voice messages. He scuffed by, under his cap a long look pleading his need, his reckless stare ignored. Fading in and out, I strained to catch words. First they took the load with pickaxe. Pony grew. On the hillside where the school juts up, I saw him zigzag through the gravel, framed by red brick, out of place, picking up rocks, looking back at me, a stranger twice his age, focused on a phone, unreachable. Cyanide brought the second rush, slant-roof Victorians still howling when thunder haunts the night, and frantic bats swoop down to raise adrenaline. Not until I rocked at the window, watching aspens shuffle, could I see the bale in his eyes, unable to stop the flapping plastic I masked up to keep those trapped bats out, those black figures chasing me down the stairs, the locked door, bad dreams veering off walls. I am scared here in the new tourist town with its double-wide post office, its drunk bar, scared someone might find out, come get me for what I saw in him. So, I'm going to skip over to a Mexico poem, because that's the other place where I write these gay poems in Mexico. We go to Puerto Vallarta in the summer, where it's extremely hot and kind of drippy hot, and it rains a lot. And it's not the best time to go, but it's the cheapest time to go. And since we have the summers off, we end up in PV. This is called Los Voladores, which is the flyers. And these are those guys from actually the other side of Mexico, Papantla, that dress up and go up these poles and then fly down. I don't know if you've ever seen these guys, but they're kind of Native Americans that have this ritual that they put on for all the tourists. Okay, Los Voladores, the flyers. You find your voice among the crowd of cries. A baby tormented by takeoff pierces drums, unglues you from the latest news. You turn the page to long strands of sand, parachutes behind speedboats, ceiling fans, pools filled with urinating children. Around the arms of a blue hair, colored wings buoy a floating dress. Your complaints deafen beside families who swarm like honeybees around hotcakes. The water is a bath you've spent too long in, fondling yourself shamelessly. In this heat, the gender of a tight ass seems pointless, and you have no desire to pet chihuahuas named Frida. All meals are paid for, and you cannot buy enough blankets to relieve annoyance of a fly that lights on your face. His name is Mosca. You crawl out beyond banana peels, men in bikinis, salt in closed eyes, out into the biggest bay of the Pacific, kicking the chop into wakes of water taxis, stink pots who spill gas onto surfaces you displace. At 6, when men remove umbrellas and add up beers, clouds accumulate in the distance above 5-star spas. Pale yellow, the sun goes down on the sea. Billows rise over hills like smoke from fire. Through thermals, a vector of pelicans flaps and glides above throngs of sweat, satellite dishes and tile roofs, orange moons capping bleached timeshares. You wonder what it's like up there. Even higher, a frigate soars and circles, suspended. The earth spins under him as he rides zephyrs across the dome, silent glider, his space unreachable on the Malecon, where you sidestep clusters of pierced youth who drag their pants sag over cobblestone, thousands in search of air-conditioned chains, hooters, Peruvian panpipes beside brocades of mariachis. It's past 10, but the sea will not relieve the heat. The push and shove of feeders, queued up for corn cobs slathered with cheeses, entrails smoking skillets under artificial light. Then, beyond boulders balanced on the beach, you see the tasseled flyers from Veracruz grip a metal pole, rung after rung, until they sit hinged to a spinning rack on top. You watch and wait, looking up at the macaw men, red and white, Teutonics dressed for success, playing flutes and passing hats, waiting for fans to muster. At last they plunge, head first from the pole, circling through the air like tether balls. Feet tied to an uncoiling rope, swinging, arms open to the dive, rappelling in circles to loud applause below. A crush of tired admirers, 5 rows deep, necks bent on the ground beneath, captivated. So, okay. I don't know. I'm going to read ATM. I think I've read this before. Some of you have heard it before, but it's kind of funny. It's not really a poem. I think it's a kind of conceit. It's also could be called ATM, but this actually takes place. This ATM machine was actually outside of Squaw Valley. So, anyway, ATM. I find him in the back of a convenience store, a bit stocky but a solid build, down by the magazines, within reach of Muscle Fitness and Mademoiselle. Versatile, I guess, or a closet case. I saunter down the aisle, reaching in my pocket. Automatically, he tells me I am welcome. He's open to the possibility of exchange, pointing to the cirrus cloud near my magnetic strip. Se habla español, he intones from out of the blue. I can tell he's one of those talkers, a romantic. Mi tesoro crosses my mind. Maybe later. English presses his buttons just as well. For just $1.50, he'll give me an additional charge. I agree to continue. He wants my MasterCard. He wants me to enter my PIN. Okay, I whisper, my finger touching his keypad. Do I want quick cash, he asks, or would I prefer a transfer, a balance inquiry, a withdrawal? Unable to think straight, I press the knob next to cash, watching the increments rise. 40, 60, 80. Okay, I say, okay, I want 100. I want it all. But he's not ready. Please wait, he says, while your transaction is being processed. I try to hold on. Finally, he begins to purr, like Eartha. Then the bells, multiple Andy Jacksons, the wavy hair, that high forehead. Legal tender for all debts, public and private. In God we do trust. After my card slips out, he asks if I want another transaction. Maybe later. He gives me a slip of paper with his number. I put it in my wallet, determined to call him soon. Getting in my pickup, I see another guy lean up against him. Slut. I knew he was too slick to be worth it. So it's kind of clever. But it's fun. So I've also, one of the things I've done, which I doubt it will ever see the light of day, but I wrote when I was in Mexico with David for a year, I wrote this elaborate blank verse poem called High, which is about the Hyacinth and Apollo story transposed to Montana. Remember, Apollo falls in love with just about everything, and he falls in love with this boy named Hyacinth, and they go out and throw discuses around, and Boreas, the wind god, gets up very jealous and decides to turn the discus, and it hits Hyacinth on the head, and he dies, and out sprouts this wonderful flower from which we get the hyacinth, because it kind of comes from, Ovid's Metamorphosis, or that he's kind of rewriting Greek myths, of course. But no one could rewrite them like Ovid could. So anyway, I transposed this story to Montana. And so Apollo comes to the University of Montana and falls in love with Hyacinth, who's some backwater kid from up somewhere in Montana, some small town in Montana. And from the May, it's also a monthly poem. And I'm going to read from May. I was going to read from April, but I'm looking forward to May, so we're going to read, as we all are, I think. So what we have here is the meeting of the two guys. We have the meeting of Hyacinth and Apollo, and this is their first encounter. In shadows cast by plots of memory, in histories that call like mirrors to a self, the ghost of blood unshelves and chases him. High emerges from the dens of rods and racks to make grades for college in Missoula, free at last from the straight gaze of Luther, to read more books, peruse the stacks and packages in dorms. One day beneath a mountain ash, orange clusters hung like ornaments of fall, High rereads the warnings of a brother to his sweet Ophelia. He himself is subject to his birth, could be, he thinks, his essay's epigraph. Suddenly on high, an angel flies across his lap, reaching to catch the lip of a spinning circle. At first sight, rising from the grass, a smile almost forgets apology. Surprised by earnest, interrupted. Nice catch, High quips, as the tan blonde god goes back to his game, looking back over his shoulder to find High's eyes again, to feel rays penetrate. From that day on, they climb Mount Sentinel at sunrise, peel off layers, catch their breath atop rocks embossed with lichen and moss. High's cheeks are red, his veins like bass strings harp on Apollo, famous tosser of discs, frisbee man, golden curls in Botticelli's wind. High is hypnotized, Apollo bowled over, irresistible the call of bodies to uncover what they feel. High soon learns to fall on Blue Mountain with his friend, how they play under butterscotch trunks of ponderosas, over needles in torn tees washed into comfort, their skin like bark, they toss and shoot, flick and curve, in May when larkspur purples sunfields, when forget-me-nots peek through shooting stars, mountain bluebirds swing from brush to branch, shirts come off with blossoms of tan backs, they brown, get tight, pant after passes with grass stains, and scabs of blood brothers. Beside blue lupin, they clutch each other until their descent in a quintessence of dust to a stuffy truck that wheels over asphalt, past big boxes on reserve. Target, Walmart warns them Montana is a prison, unlike the infinite space of the nutshell they call High's room. Easy to idealize the sun's truth, its moment oxygenated from leaps into the hug of H2O. Easy to remember him on the rock, beaded and goosebumped. Easy to forget family and friends, guys High grew up with, skipping rocks in class, gangs that sanctioned girls only, jocks who told jokes about homos, kept a code that fucked fags and bald chicks. We all know the type. High could hardly tell his teammates or his dad, the six-wheeler whose tag was tough, who hunted to live and lived to hunt animals and deviates. Could hardly say, hey mom, Paulo and I, well we are an item. Could hardly speak in that unspoken tongue before that holy ghost, his grandpa, Norwegian trailblazer, Hyperion, could hardly breathe a word, could hardly tell anyone but himself. Apollo could have gone to any school in any state, but he grew up in love with alpine slopes, with herders and keepers of bees. He loved the wild country, unruled by moderation, he was told to adore, craved ravens and wolves, sunrise on Swan Lake and rattlers. Bow hunter, lutist, poet, he picked Montana to pursue his passions, the rugged ridges of the Pintlers, turquoise stretches of the rafted Flathead, poems of place, maps of Big Salmon Lake in the Wild Bob, his knack for verse and agility with words, wind rustling cottonwoods, the misted lights steaming atop flat bodies of silk streams. He came to find young men like him, beardless anglers below gorges of Alberton on boulders, mayflies hatching on the Wise, releasing orange cutthroats near Needle Falls, broad tan chests above thin hips like his own. He fancy guys, into kayaks and haiku. Yet luck in love rarely comes to this one, endowed with all the curled charms of beauty. His family hounds him with prophecies of duty, pushes him to woo women, to flay the sacred goat, strum his guitar, leave the sons of shepherds for a place on the board. Econometric models he must learn to forecast trends in shipping, pulled from school to serve a pantheon of pushy relatives who see the West as a fling, a fad, a dalliance, wild oats sown among tax-sheltered tycoons, roughing it in the parks with cooks and guides. Between the imaginary and the symbolic, Apollo tears himself. What he sees in high is what he wants, freedom from destiny, from the trappings of those immortal fates, who call him back from all the flaws that flesh is heir to. In high, Apollo finds escape, landscape, the sweep of open sky floating untroubled across the big hole, glacier. So, I don't know, how much time is it? About 10 minutes? 28. Okay, so I'm going to read one more poem. And one of the things about that one is it's a full-length poem and everything, but there's a lot of stealing from Shakespeare in that poem. And actually another project I have is rewriting Shakespeare from a gay perspective, as some of you have heard. And I'm getting stuck right now on that project with As You Like It. And my real problem is with Phoebe. And Phoebe's in love with Rosalind, and Rosalind has that great line where she says, "She Phoebes me." And that's where I've left off on my project, because I can't figure out how to write "She Phoebes me." That's the title. But anyway, I rewrote the sonnets, and I want to read the end of it. They aren't sonnets, but it's called The Shameless Sonneteer, and I thought maybe I could read the end of this poem, because as you know in the sonnets, or maybe you don't, but anyway, it starts out with the narrator of the sonnet is in love with this, actually, his patron is a young man who's an aristocrat, and his first 19 poems are asking him to breed, to get married, to reproduce himself, because he's so beautiful, and for some reason the young guy decides not to do that. And so the narrator kind of gives up, and then, in the next 50, the hundreds of these sonnets, not hundreds, but 153 or something, he decides, well, I give up. I'm just going to fall in love with the guy because he's not going to get married, and they have this tumultuous relationship with other people involved. And at the end of the sonnets, the dark lady arrives, and the young man falls in love with the dark lady, and there's this horrible, love triangle, and it's all kind of like a soap opera. And it's that where we're going to pick up, I think, with the part where they're kind of on the rocks, basically. When you went away, the blues came in and met me. Head down, I ran uphill where lupins speared the fields of mustard grass, constellations in the grays of chestnuts tugging the ground, pulling up buds of marjoram. Everything I saw turned to you. Those waves of mountains beneath a paper sky, buttercups kerneled in the forest, fern tips a lighter green, moss clung to a stump the color of your vest, that day we tripped the falls through muck and needles, stripped to skin and leaped from rocks into jade, Eakins with my new camera, shooting you, summoning that session. I knew I had to leave. I couldn't go in. I ran back bursting with pictures. You, the lighthouse, the star above dusk, unremoved. I ran back and stretched out on the mowed field. I knew how hard sorrow hits, how soothing the salve. I left a poem for you with your man about tempests and sextants, about your inboard, 16 feet of wood in whitecaps during that August storm, bailing after the hull rose and slapped the troughs, nearly swamped, capsized, life jackets choked. You thought we could make it, and we did. Barely, shook up, huddled in a shower after, turning the lever toward H. Remembering that past, I knew I'd follow you to the edge. I would not bend to doom, to impediments and alterations. The words I used, no one wants to read them anymore. But I wanted to read you as you stood, waiting to be seated, coming backstage to invite me home. Over your shoulders, your hair fell in folds, the color of winter apples. Later, under a trellis, we wound our arms around columns, my man and I together, walking in the sun once more. Our dates were brief, our savor simple. In processions I refused to carry your canopy, would write no masks to honor pomp, knew no art but you and me undressed, unrented, born to desire, without rank or pyramids, without drama. But crows came into our air with accents of slander. Their caws would not stop. They peopled the trees with envy of our sport, spent tithes to condemn us in full-page broadsides. Vile, rank, beveled, the words they used to abuse us, to reproach our being with their frail spies. We became that vile, charactered. We played the part they wrote for us, backspaced into blankness, unsaved. Even alone and defiant beneath the dripping eaves, I felt their thrall, seeping into my esteem. Their sirens turned our hope to fear, our kiss on the bridge into a bar beneath the street, stifled with smoke and shots, holed up. The doors shut, left us in the dark, fumbling for a switch, banging heads. I could not find the lines to shape you. We could not write or speak, could not be seen, sting in my eyes, and you a blur. Her raven eyes mourned our passing, our wrack. She hooked me while I darted through the coral floor, at swim through her bay, rude and bloody in her waist, tangled in her nylon, pent, enslaved, wound around the darkness of her hell. How relieved to find a she to covet, a box for the deposit of my spirit, spent, anchored, the lie I lived, perjury in my heart, while you looked over my shoulder at drafts I tried to hide, bringing down the screen, the curtain, her darkness evinced my own. I was the whore, not her. I the one who plotted in the commons when you rode by on your mount, that roan. You met my mark that afternoon, fell for her in the park as we strode beneath arcs of elms, across crushed granite, light damasked, perfumed by her sin, dappled as leaves spun in the breeze, London in the summer, hot with plague and rebel angels. You got to know her, tongue of fire. At first I clapped, happy to have you back. Then my fever, wasting in madness without cure, my pointless trip to Bath, my appetite for you. Now branded, forged, the disease we gave each other. I could not watch anymore. On the way to work, I saw my boots kick dirt, the tide take barges down the river. I could not look up at the preachers, the hawkers, sick, careless among the gentle cheaters, crowds fawning. I wove my line toward the house, my desk backstage. I tried to get you out of my soliloquy. Deep breaths and sighs, my back straight, tried to release myself from you. Your hands in the kitchen, turning faucets, pressing on, emptying the rack, cupboards closed on cups. I heard you singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow and felt the shiver on my neck, saw the faded hardcourt where I returned your serve, stones on the road from the top of Glacier, iron red, dwarf aspens quaking beside the lake. I waded in to hold the gunnels, and we paddled across St. Mary's against hard wind, digging deep into the waves. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Molly, for inviting me. Honored to read with Casey. Great tribute to Basin, man. But you know, it's too long, that's why they don't want it in the newsletter. It has nothing to do with that. I don't know. When I was in my, when I was in my 20s, I lived in Basin for 6 months, and haven't really lived there since, but somehow, in my first novel, I even said this, somehow people around the area, around Helena area, do live in Basin is code for, are you a lesbian? And so, that for a long time, people always assumed that I lived in Basin, that I grew up in Basin, and now what I like is when people say, do you still live in Basin? I go, huh, what does that mean? But it is, I like your poem. That's a wonderful poem about Basin and that kind of small circle in the midst of all that. The art that's there, the Montana Artists Refuge, the High Note when it was open, just how a few people can make a community something quite extraordinary in the midst of poverty, contention. Even in Basin, they fundamental Christianity, so a whole bunch of stuff. It's an amazing place. I wanted to read a few poems from Thistle. Hi, Bob. A few poems from the book, and then some new poems. Thistle, for those of you who don't know, its project is that each poem in it is based on an herb, or what they used to call a simple, those plants closest to the ground, some wild, some garden plants, most of them healing in some way. And they're kind of meditations about each one. As I wrote them, and I worked on them for a number of years, would go to the plant, try to have some kind of communication, dialogue, correspondence with it, and I found over the years that what attracted me to the plants, my allegiance to them, was that in some way their concerns were particularly in turn with the concerns of women, I thought, tied as we are more closely to death and birth, healing, illness. But I also found, since I've been reading them, that there's kind of a subtext too, that there seems to be something I kind of knew about, but this heretical kind of subversive line that went through that seems very gay to me. And, in any of the reviews, no one ever mentioned it. So it's curious to me. So I'm going to start with this one. It's called Egyptian Walking Onion, which is a plant, an onion that has its bulbs on the top. And so it gets so heavy when they become big enough that they fall over. And they plant themselves. That's why they're called walking, because they just plant from one place to another. So this is Egyptian Walking Onion. At last we come to you after a summer of the delicate, arugula, cilantro, the bib-leafed lettuces. Folded over the withered peas, carrots, raw scalped from frost, the belts of your contortions remain green. You were the first thin plumes of spring, so much of what was to be expected, straight shot to the sun. But then came your maturity, so odd we were afraid to touch you, when you grew the sperm-shaped, the 6-bulb stars and exposed those bulbs to air. To say you flaunted them is not too extreme. You, the family curiosity. You wear the tail feathers of a poppycock, party hat of a Venetian with green, pink, and wood pale streamers. Lost, we say, in the gyrations that walked you here from sands and slaves, your petals their favorite meat. Admit it. You revel in your mutancy. You stretch, fail, and drop, weighted by your eccentricities, ancient as Egypt, yet harmless. Then why does it still shock us, this perversity that masquerades for resurrection? This poem is jasmine. I know it's not a Montana plant, but I was thinking about, I was reading about the troubadours and how one thing that they would do, the woman would ask for something to bring back something that was impossible to bring back. You know, the quest, bring me, you know, a hair of the wizard on top of the hill. I'm just making this up. You probably have better examples. But so I, in the middle of winter, asked for a sprig of jasmine. Bring me something rare. What seas are here are frozen, a fume to force the bud of my heart. My heels are scraps. All my friends' mothers are dying. The trough is narrow and I sleep in it. Relax. I ask for nothing dangerous. Pink tips and lacquer, the small green worm of a tongue. Jasmine. The white flocked hem of a secret lifted, a confidence breached, packed into its sleek dress, the one that darkens before it opens. A frill, a subterfuge, the wound rain makes in the snow. Look, I don't know what love is or what damage it has done to women, our lips painted red to resemble labia. Love as not that. The petals I ask for are tender, opaque, doused in the clay of their perfume. What they are is what I want from you, heliotropic. Disrupt me with your lavish will. Let's see. One thing that I was working with Patricia on some of these poems, Patricia Godica, who was a great friend of mine, and she said, you'll never sell this book because, you know, Louise Gluck already wrote The Wild Iris, and it's all about all these plant poems, and each one of them is about an iris, and you just can't do it. And so I had to write a poem about, I thought we were doing something really different, and so I just kept going stubbornly. And it did take me a long time to sell the book, she was right. One person, Maxine Kuhlman, who actually wrote a blurb on the back of the book, said, "You'll never sell a book of veggies." And I wrote it back and I said, they aren't all veggies, they're herbs and they're flowers. But it did take a while. And one thing I thought I should think about the Gluck book, which is Strange and Beautiful, for those of you who know it, just a beautiful book, but was speaking to the plants and the different multiple voices, the gardener, the sun, in a kind of Christian theology that didn't seem to be part of my project. And so I have this epigraph from Gluck's book: whatever returns from oblivion returns to find a voice. Iris. The iris bulbs huddle, their brown rags sopped, yet above the light green flumes have barely parted. This is when I love them best, before they speak and risk it all. Their petals washed out under the barreling hooves of the spring, all night the creek moving stones. I love the birds precisely because I don't know what they're singing, how the iris stay unblossomed in silt. What if they recede like this rain that rests before it seeps? How truly imperative is form. My neighbor believes that men must learn to be on earth and that women must learn to be gods. The tiger-striped eye peeks out from its lids. Why, it seems to ask, or why not? I mean, what does it care for the future of its tribe? It lives, its life is almost done. Once a mind was on fire, then it was quenched with rain, slowed to ashes and mud. Better the grace of one smooth blade repeated, sealed as a god is sealed, than to be wrong. I want to read some new poems. I've been working on, I finished a new manuscript in February, and it's all prose poems. And I think I'll just read them. This one's called The Language of Flowers. They're fun for me to read, I think. I might have to take my glasses off. Sorry. Okay. Language of Flowers. I wish you were here on my arm. I wish I could crawl between your sheets, my poppy, my tulip tree, my sweet basil. You are what I used to dream of as a child, what my mother did. Not so much a dress as its fabric, pink dotted Swiss, a white voile shirt with French cuffs. Tell me your name, what you seek, and to what you aspire. I will mount a campaign for your world. Magnolia, cloudy and thick, each petal the exact temperature of a hand. It is Saturday morning. We are living near lakes, luxuriant, privileged creatures that we are. Our authors say cypress is the favored tree of the earth, say that flowers are the liturgy of the angels. Wings peeled back so they lift on the breeze, centered the golden ovaries bees feast on. Drunk as a young girl on the words of Dylan Thomas, I stagger in the streets of my small town, moonwalking the river, saying, son of our bald fruit, raw honey. I stick my fingers into the champagne flute of a lily. Everything bridal white becomes stained. I can't help but be selfish, being faithful to myself, dabbing it behind the knees. Yes, frosting. The next poem is called The City of Many Lovers, and if there are any lesbians in the room, they know that unlike many people, lesbians seem to stay best friends with all their exes. And so when you get a new girlfriend, they all come with her. And so it's an amazing kind of anyway, I call this the city of many lovers. Lunadi, Martadi, Mercoladi. It's moon day, tomorrow a day for Mars. Moon that divides the days evenly. Moon that strikes on the downbeat. And a day in the middle, which is a miracle. We visit your ex-lovers, which is to say, the sense that you could leave me tomorrow. Not the most loved, the most new, what to count on. In the Japanese film, the Buddhist praises her God in each of his 36,000 manifestations. Of course, you like me. I am round. I have no edges. You can play with me. So can your dog. Then I crawl into an absence I have been remodeling all my life, a crockery smoothed with warm water. Moon dreaming of his brother bronze, cold milk moon over lake and fog diptych. We have been here a month. I have left my people behind and adopted yours. I imagine you have made this happen. I imagine a tree falling, and the tree falls. It seems both gift and penalty that I was left alone as a child, while you, in your city, learned civility. This one's called the Cart of Atmosphere. You feed your brother, damaged beyond repair, apples, dried bananas, baked things, doling them out so he doesn't choke, singing to him of widgeons and pigeons. The bar girls in leather, the tattooed butches, your two friends, one with cancer, who took their lives, and the men who are not butterflies, tramping the soil, who have called the sun down, melted the ice caps. I see them as other, and you see them as twins. How far the distant shores of the heart. Your tears for them like the light on the willow after rain, like a shop of glass beads on the Rialto. For a month we have walked arm in arm in the park, sweet our mouths, the lake ribboned with pearl. I told you that I abandoned my own beloved grandmother to the thieves, that because I would not care for her, she lost her home. I had a lover who had to tear at me to get free. You craft the exquisite language of your weeping now, as if for me, something I might place on the threshold of my workroom. This one's called The Symposium on Sleep, which is a subject that at my age I don't get enough of. And it's, well, I'll just read it. You'll think it's about something else at first, I just know it. This Symposium on Sleep. No one mentions women in the Symposium on Sleep. The bodies flash all night like solar flares. What a candle might feel like, softening, burning from its center. A slash pile set with crumpled newspapers between its limbs, doused with kerosene, then lit. That quick. The Iraqi man at the open market selling sugar at half price takes his last breath and pulls the pin. Sugar substitute for what? We are left with no continuum, having been untethered from the moon, her light cracked like wing bones between his teeth, digging for the marrow that would calm us. Then what? Choose all the words, Grace says to her children, though sometimes you will be swept up like a leaf. I rub lavender oil into the scar on my friend's breast, tiny given the size of the tumor, the longer horizontal gash. What are the alliances we make now? The wild comes back and the rains in shambles, an old way of being on earth that included finding our bearings. Go out, the voice says. There is still something for you to see, so awake, so ready to be fed. Just two more. This one is called Woman Inside a Tree, and some of you may know there's an Iranian filmmaker named Shirin Neshat, and they show her films in art museums. I've seen them a number of times. They're strikingly beautiful. They have no words, and they're usually projected on two huge screens where some different things are happening on each screen. And I saw this film in Seattle called Tuba, where this woman was in one of the film sides of the film. This woman was inside the trunk of a tree. You couldn't. You could see her. She fit in perfectly, and she was sleeping. It was quite a stunning image. And on the other side, there are all these men coming over this hill and over the hills from a village toward her. Woman Inside a Tree. In the Iranian movie, the woman who stands inside the tree doesn't wake. Like the butterfly, she is dreaming the world or she is dreamt by it. Here, sniff her hands. She knows your father. She's met your mother. From which direction do her half-dreams come? Over the ridge, a village of men in dark shirts and pants. It is not that she can make them inconsequent. It is not simply a matter of sleeping. She slips inside herself, as one does, into the folds of the trunk. Her roots meet blood sacs, hermitages, chunks of amber. O crown, she knows the birds, even the large ones. Today, the announcement, the president is sending in more troops, in direct violation of the peace the people ask for. What can one woman do? A desert shrine. The camera focuses within the compound, the courtyard, the stone arcade. There is not enough oil, not enough water. Even now, the men are breaching the stone wall. Yet it is we who are terrorized on her behalf. This is the last one. I started these prose poems a couple years ago when I was in residence at the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, and it was in May, and it was May, and it was spring, and it was just beautiful, and there were all this sweet briar growing all over. It's a wild rose, and so this is my sweet briar poem. Today, my cusp, I have hit full bloom. Already you can feel me close on my way back to you. You cannot see what rose is at my lips or where its tender arbors in my hair, white, soft as banana. Today I am glutted with gloss. Today anything I don't like I call postmodern. Go inside a stone, that would be your way. I am wandering the woodlots of childhood. No one knew then what to call the hatched vines snaking up these trunks like a hair shirt. But the pauses I remember, when the country lane gladdened the shed summer light, or when the brown water disappeared under oak large as mountains. It is a wonder any one of us survived. I hid in the lilacs, their voluptuous violet shade, the cool dirt underneath I would dig my hands in. My people, or kind grandparents of the corn and sun, have all but disappeared from the fields. We had a pact, much like the one I think I've made with you. Hey, daydream, though the boys were harsh and cornered us, though our mothers didn't protect the girls, we loved those girls, would fill our lives with them.